September of 2012, we're planning an extension trip to Nicaragua. The following presentation will cover some of the basics of that trip, as well as laying out some of the context for the trip. And on the site, we have some information on the benefits of international experience for extension educators. And you're welcome to go there and grab these and use them to make your case for why travel to Nicaragua, or any international travel for that matter, is of value to you as an extension educator and to our system. The next question that arises is why Nicaragua? And there are a number of factors that contribute to our selection of Nicaragua as the environment or opportunity for our first trip. And we have some active connection to nonprofits working in Nicaragua. And we've recently developed some connections to the National Autonomous University of Nicaragua in León. And it's fairly easy to access, and the relative low cost of travel is another factor that contributes to it. And I'd like to toss in here the fact that Nicaragua is also a very safe country for us to travel to. Contrary to some impressions that may be out there, Nicaragua is one of the safest countries for folks to visit in Latin America. So there are a number of compelling factors that make Nicaragua an ideal choice for us. Existing collaborative opportunities, the ability to explore future collaborations, and the existence of an infrastructure that we can make use of that will ensure that we have good transportation, places to stay, and things like that. So Nicaragua, just to sort of contextualize its location on the globe, is in Central America, obviously, and it is about the size of New York State. And there are three zones, discrete zones in Nicaragua that you can identify. On the Pacific coast, there are the lowlands, and then there's the Central Highlands area, and this is the area where we'll be spending a few days around Matagalpa and San Ramon. This is also the coffee growing region in Nicaragua. And then over here we have the Caribbean lowlands. There are cultural differences, and the cultural differences are in some ways enforced by these mountains that run right through here. The Caribbean lowlands are largely Creole, English, with indigenous languages still being spoken there. There are three main indigenous groups still present in the Northern Regional Autonomous Zone and the Southern Regional Autonomous Zone, as opposed to the rest of Nicaragua from these mountains on over, which is largely mestizo, Spanish influence, colonized by the Spaniards, and that influence is very present here. So there are two different major subdivisions within Nicaragua when I think about it. The economy of Nicaragua is based on coffee, beef, gold, sugar, shrimp, and lobster, and also an increasing amount of industrial goods that are being produced, some as a result of the new trade agreements that have gone into effect there. It's not uncommon or very hard to find garments in some of our larger chain stores that have been produced in Nicaragua. It is also the second poorest country in the Americas. Haiti having the distinction of being the first, Nicaragua is not a wealthy country by and large. And just to give you a little history to sort of put recent events in context there, in 1821 Nicaragua gained its independence from Spain. In 1849 there was a railway and canal treaty that was negotiated, so the Panama Canal was originally envisioned to be a canal through Nicaragua, and largely that's, well, it didn't come to fruition, but if you look at the map of Nicaragua, you can see Lake Nicaragua takes up a very large portion of that country. It's the largest freshwater lake in the hemisphere. It's also the only freshwater lake that has sharks. But the intent was to use that large body of water as part of the pathway through in a canal. That, of course, did not work out, and we ended up with the Panama Canal. In 1856, we have William Walker, who is a key American figure in some of the history of Nicaragua. 1936 to 1979 was the time of the Somoza regime. And in July of 1979 was the date of the Sandinista Revolution, which deposed the Somoza regime and ushered in the current democratic society that they have operational now. The United States has had a long and intimate and largely contentious in some ways relationship, our government at least, contentious relationship with Nicaragua. And these are just looking at some of the interventions that have occurred since 1907 through the 1990s. You can see that we have had a lot of influence in that region, and a lot of influence that has not been viewed in a very positive light. One of the key things to pay attention to is in 1934, Augusto Cesar Sandino successfully expelled U.S. armed forces from Nicaragua. Sandino is a figure that is very present and prominent in Nicaraguan culture these days. The Sandinistas derive their name from Sandino. And then, of course, in 1981 to 90 is the Contra War, which was a direct result of the victory of the Sandinistas and the perception that they were too leftist for us to be comfortable with. William Walker was an American who was president of Nicaragua in 1856. He was invited to Nicaragua during the Civil War there. The Liberal Party invited Walker to Nicaragua, and he took power, was recognized by President Pierce, who was the President of the United States at the time. And, of course, needless to say, that didn't last very long. It didn't go over very well. He was forced out of Nicaragua, but on the way out he torched Grenada during his retreat, pretty much burned it to the ground. Augusto Sandino fought against the U.S. military occupation that was occurring in Nicaragua between 1927 and 1933. He had a nationalist ideology, and we could certainly talk a lot about Sandino and his ideas and their impacts, but that's not the purpose of this presentation. He was engaged in some peace negotiations. They wanted to lay down arms and reconcile with the government at that time, President Sacasa. After a successful negotiation, he was led out of the negotiations, escorted away, and assassinated by the National Guard. The Guard at that time was commanded by Anastasio Somoza Garcia, and this begins the Somoza regime, essentially. From 1936 to 1979, Somoza and two of his sons ruled Nicaragua, and there's a lot you can read about that, a lot that could be said, but we'll gloss over that for now. And the Sandinista Revolution occurred in July of 1979. In this slide you can see the influence of Sandino was obviously very much alive, both in the name and the iconography used during that revolution. It ushered in an era of democratic elections. There have been some contestation around those elections, but nevertheless it was a major transition from the Somoza regime in years. Just to quickly talk a little bit about the culture of Nicaragua, it is indeed a nation of poets. Poetry is highly valued there, and it's just a living element of the culture there. It's a very Christian country, largely Catholic, but there is an increase in evangelical Christian communities. As we mentioned before, it's mostly mestizo, except the Caribbean coast, which has the English influence, with three main indigenous languages and identities still active there. The mestizo part of Nicaragua is the indigenous influence isn't as present. It was very much diluted, and then during the Somoza years it was intentionally diluted, although there are some recent attempts to reclaim some of the indigenous identity in Nicaragua. And gallo pinto, rice and beans, is one of the main dishes you'll encounter in Nicaragua, and it's a source of daily sustenance. Ruben Dario, a Nicaraguan poet who is very much, again, a presence, a living presence in Nicaragua. You can find street names. Dario is actually entombed in the cathedral in Leon, and when we're in Leon you can stop in and take a visit, but you can learn a lot more about him and just by doing a quick Google search. His poetry is still very much alive. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the previous trips that I've done with students, and in 2011-2012 I've led some groups of students down to Nicaragua, and I thought it would just provide some idea of some of the activities that we've engaged in, and also give you a sense of what I've done previously. In January of this past year, January 2012, we had a learning exchange go to Nicaragua. We were focused on coffee, crafts, and culture. Our time was spent in San Ramon, with the exception of the final 2 days spent in Grenada. a coffee growing region, and a lot of artisans and craftsmen in that area. And the cultural aspect came out in the poetry workshop and performance that we were involved in. We generally, when we take students down there, we don't do service. We don't do service learning. It's much more of a collaborative learning model that's evolved from discussions that we've had in Nicaragua. And it focuses on activities and experiences to build solidarity. So really, we're not service-oriented, we're solidarity-oriented in these trips. And this is just a few shots from some of the activities we engaged in. And then the final days, the top two shots are a festival that was going on in Granada, and this is the lake at Laguna de Pollo. In 2011, we had our first learning exchange, and this was where we really started talking about intentionally shifting the model from service learning. And this collaborative learning model that we've developed has evolved from discussions in Nicaragua with some Nicaraguan students and some of our other collaborators and participants. And in this picture here, you can see three of our Nicaraguan university students we've worked with. This is Michael, Judith, and Digna. And you will hopefully meet them when you go to Nicaragua. And in 2011 especially, but also carried through in 2012, was the use of digital media tools to sort of mediate the cultural differences, to find a bridge that allowed very divergent groups of participants to work together. It was a tremendously wonderful experience, I think, hopefully for everybody involved. Now let's talk a little bit about our trip that we're planning upcoming in this September from the 7th to the 16th. And we have some collaborators that we've already started working with in Nicaragua, and we will no doubt identify a few more folks to work with. The university in León, UNAM León, this is their crest. The Community Agroecology Network, we'll be working with them a little bit. IICA, the Inter-American Institute of Cooperation around Agriculture. UCA San Ramon is the cooperative that's in San Ramon and works with a lot of coffee growers and producers there. Planting Hope is a smaller not-for-profit that I've worked through before, and we'll be working with them to provide a lot of the infrastructure support and hopefully transportation while we're in Nicaragua. And the tentative schedule, you can see this is available on the web. We'll be arriving on September 7th in Managua. We'll cross the street, spend the night at the Best Western Las Mercedes. This will give us a chance to acclimate to being in the country. The climate is a little bit different, and of course the language is a lot different. It'll give us a chance to unwind, de-stress from travel, and start talking about the activities that are coming up. The next day we depart for San Ramon. We'll meet our host families there and settle in. And September 9th is tentatively identified as Cooperatives and Sustainability Day. September 10th we'll sort of further the conversation around cooperatives and look at youth and cooperatives and promoting community food sovereignty. And that'll be in collaboration with Community Agroecology Network and UCA. On September 11th, we'll tentatively focus on microenterprise, women, and economic development with a visit to the community of El Chile. On September 12th, we'll depart. San Ramon will travel to León, possibly with a side trip to El Sauce, but we're not sure about that quite yet. In León, we'll meet with some of our potential collaborators at the university. On September 13th, we'll spend in León in the region talking about and looking at some community development projects, some of the agricultural work they've got going on there. September 14th, we head off to Masaya, the market. It's a great crafts market, and then we arrive in Granada. On the 15th, we'll head on up to the Laguna de Pollo, and we'll just sort of spend a little bit of time unwinding, swimming, and engaging some discussions and explorations of future work. And then on the 16th, we travel home. And just to give you an idea of where we'll be in the country, this is our travel route. We'll be landing in Managua here. Then we head off to San Ramon, and this is all the mountainous coffee growing region here. After our time in San Ramon, we head over to the Pacific, to León, where it's going to be a completely different climate and a completely different environment. And then we're down to Masaya and Granada, and then back up to Managua to depart. So we'll be spending the 8th through the 11th in San Ramon, and these are just some pictures from San Ramon. This is an example of what the region looks like. The mountains you can see, some deforested areas there as well. Homestays are going to be an opportunity, and it's a great opportunity while we're in San Ramon to actually live with a family for a few days. You'll be immersed in Nicaraguan culture. At a homestay, you are provided with 3 meals a day. The family takes care of you in many ways, and it becomes very much a deeply immersive environment. If there's anyone out there that is really uncomfortable with homestays, we can set up, there's a hotel in San Ramon, we can set up a stay for you there, but for a full immersion, for the complete experience, staying with a family is just an incredible experience, and it really introduces you very deeply into the culture and the daily life of folks in Nicaragua. On September 9th, we'll be visiting Cooperative La Hermandad. This is a coffee cooperative of 28 to 30 producers have gotten together to form this cooperative. They are very focused on sustainability and biodiversity. And it's a great organization, a great group of growers that we'll get to meet and talk to. On the 11th, we'll head off to El Chile. Then again, this is the community where we have a resurgence of an indigenous weaving tradition. It's a very interesting community. We'll get a chance to talk to the weavers and really look at issues of, well, some issues of microenterprise, the issues that women face when they start engaging in productive activities outside of the home, some of the challenges that are faced there, as well as the opportunity to meet some of the folks who actually live in El Chile. This is Don Gregorio. He makes brooms and other products out of straw. And this is Don Teofilo. He's a farmer with an extended family. Incredibly kind and generous man. Incredibly good-natured, and he's just a special person to meet. There are a lot of special people, and it's just fascinating. The 12th and the 13th we'll spend in León, and here on the right are 2 of our potential collaborators in León, and you'll get to meet them, and we'll discuss the activities the university is engaged in and possibilities for exchange and collaboration there. And then on the 14th and 15th, we head off to Granada for a little bit of decompression, debriefing, reflection, and exploration of the future. And this is the cathedral in León. It's the cathedral in Granada. The cathedral in León is substantially larger and is also the home to the tomb of Rubén Dario, which you will be able to visit. Granada and León are historically were the seats of power back in the days of yore. Depending on who was in power, if the liberals were in power, the seat of government was in León. If the conservatives were in power, the seat of government moved to Granada. In order to get away from that, you have the government permanently based in Managua now. And the cost, we've projected a cost of $1,350, not including airfare. And you can see the cost breakdown here. If we exceed 10 participants, the cost will be reduced to $1,250. The reason for that reduction largely has to do with the cost of transportation. And so that is a factor we have to take into account. And I checked earlier this morning the cost of flights, and from LaGuardia to Managua was $570. But today from Syracuse to Managua was only $600. Last night when I checked, from Syracuse was $800 plus. So there's a lot of variability in the cost, and it pays to pay attention to the cost of flights and book when we find an opportunity where we get prices like this. And that covers the very broad and quick overview. Any questions, you can certainly email me at pt36@cornell.edu. It's a little more about specifically San Ramon you can find on the web. And please feel free to contact me if there are questions or other things you'd like to know. I'd be more than happy to talk with you. Thanks.